Good morning, everyone. How are you? I hope you had a great weekend. So we're ready to start another great day in our summer school of Brazilian studies. Welcome again. And today we will have a very good lecture on Brazilian economy. And I'm pleased and honored to welcome Professor Patrícia Nasser, who's going to be the one leading the talk today. And I do hope you enjoy and learn a lot. And we'll do the same way we have done previously in the other past 4 days. So she will deliver her lecture, Professor Patrícia, and then by the end, we're going to welcome some questions. And then, of course, you may start throughout the talk, you may start your questioning in the chat, and we'll gather the questions from there. Okay, so thank you very much again for your presence. And Professor Patrícia, I give the floor to you so you can get started. Okay. Professor Patrícia.
Hello.
Oh, good.
Are you listening? Okay. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to this virtual lecture, unfortunately, on Brazilian economy. That is part of, sorry, let's start again. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to this virtual lecture on Brazilian economy. That is part of the Summer School of Brazilian Studies of the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais. Unfortunately, this year we have to do it virtually, but I think that it will be a good experience to everyone. I am Professor Patrícia Nasser de Carvalho. I'm part of the Department of Economics of the university. Actually, I teach, and my research topics are mainly related to international economy, international political economy, but last year I was invited to take part of the summer school on this lecture on Brazilian studies, and it was a very good experience. So I think that they invited me again because it was a very good experience for me and to the other students. So here I am. I hope we have a good time. I intend to present or to explain about an hour about Brazilian economy. Then we can open up for questions, and Luciano will help me with that because everybody, you are used to the way that you're doing as last week. So we can talk about Brazilian conjuncture economy and other topics if you want after my explanations, and please feel free to ask me whatever you want. Okay, so let's start. I will share my presentation with you. Let's see here. Let me try again here, sorry. It was on the... Oh my God, I don't know what I say.
I saw it down there, Professor, on the feed PowerPoint.
I don't know what happened because I saved on the.
I
Okay.
Go
think
down, or
Here,
go
I
here.
think
down a little bit. I think it was, I think I saw
Sorry.
it.
I think it's
Can
saved like
you,
PPT,
Yes,
PPT.
yes,
So maybe
yeah, go down a little bit. I saw it.
are you, can you see the slides now?
No, I can see your working area.
Okay, I think that. And now,
There you go. Now we see it. Excellent.
so that's my name, Patrícia Nasser de Carvalho. I'm in the Department of Economics. So here are the summary of the topics we are going to discuss. I think that all the first 10 topics are related to what I can say that are good points or positive points related to Brazilian economy. I will explain to you why the Brazilian economy is a big economy and is a well-diversified, industrialized economy. We have many products and services that are made here. And we also will discuss why Brazilian is considered a big consumer market, even though we have a lot of inequalities, economic inequalities here. And also it's a global destination for foreign direct investments. There are the investments that are made by the foreign enterprises in Brazil. We are considered also a global player. We are going to discuss how the economic role of Brazil is related to its political role, international political role, and why and how Brazil plays an international role in international institutions and forums, why it's an important import and export market, an important business hub and a stable economy, and it's the large income has the large income transfer program in the world. So this is, I can say that these are the main topics. Sure, there are parts that are more conjuncture, other parts that are more structural related to Brazilian economy. But if you don't understand any point, then we can discuss it point by point, okay? And in the second part, I will explain to you why the whole amount what Brazil produces in terms of goods and services is decreasing from 5-6 years from now, and how the low contribution of the industrial sector to the GDP. We have some sectors that are very strong, but we have also sectors that are not very strong, and we have difficulties to competitive in the international scenario. Then we are going to discuss a relative less complex economy, why there are some sectors that are not considered as other developing countries very strong, or especially in terms of services that we are improving, but we still cannot, and why. The other topics are related to low labor productivity, poverty rate that is increasing again. We are going to see how this poverty rate is, what is the behavior of this poverty rate, and the low participation in international relations, international trade, why Brazil is still considered an economy that is not open to international trade, and other barriers to our growth and development. So I know that you all, whatever you are, from the many universities and countries that you are located, I know that you have different backgrounds. So as other studying areas, I will try to explain as in a more easy way as you can understand. And if you don't understand anything, you can ask me in the end of my presentation, okay? So I'll begin with the Brazilian economy as if you can take a photograph of Brazil, what can we say about it? How can we classify Brazil as a developing country, but which kind of developing country? Né? Brazil is a big economy, even though we are facing a big crisis, and it's not something new. It's not due to the COVID-19, and we, in the end of this presentation, we are going to discuss it. But the whole domestic product, what we produce in a year in terms of goods and services, the amount is $1,084 billion in the last year. This year, perhaps the forecast is not so good, but and it also used to be better, but we are the 9th largest economy in the world, according to the World Bank. So it's not a small economy, it's a big economy, and it's the first largest developing economy in Latin America. After Brazil is Mexico. We are going to see in the next chart, but Brazil is considered a developing country, and some authors also used to say, because not even more, that Brazil is an emerging economy that is improving. It's not only growing, but it's also developing. We are going to discuss later why if it's also is still happening, and if it's not, and why. But in general terms, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, that are the main international organizations that do research or advises about the undeveloping or developing economy, they all say that Brazil is still a developing economy, and it's the first largest developing economy in Latin America. It's also a very populous country with 211 million inhabitants. What means that it's a huge consumer markets for many goods and services, and it's also the most populated in Latin America. LA is Latin America, what means that it accounts for 35% of total population of the region Latin America. We are not considering here the Caribbean, only Latin America, that begins in Mexico until Argentina and Brazil in the south. So we have the 5th population of the world, that it's not so, that's considered a big population. And our most population is located in the cities, the metropolitan areas. So 87% of all the more than 200 million inhabitants are located in big cities or in the east coast of Brazil, and 87% is located in urban and metropolitan areas. So the next chart, you can see the participation of countries' GDP on Latin America. Brazil represents 37% of GDP. So in light green, you can see 37%, followed by Mexico. And Brazil and Mexico are also considered the most diversified economy. We're going to discuss also this. And they have the big metropolitan area, the biggest metropolitan areas. Okay, thank you. The big metropolitan area. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And followed by Argentina. But here you can see the difference between the participation of Brazil and the participation of Mexico and Argentina, followed by Colombia. So we have 37% of GDP participation in the whole area. That is a good amount if you consider that we are our economy is three times of Argentina and bigger than Mexico. And Brazil and Mexico have the biggest industrial hubs, São Paulo and the north of Mexico. They are considered well-diversified economies due to these industrial areas. We are also going to discuss this later. Okay, please. So why is Brazil considered a well-diversified economy? It's the largest car market producer in the world. We produced last year about 2.5 million of vehicles, considering all the vehicles, including trucks. It's not the amount of 2018 was bigger, but it's also a considerable amount. 2.5 million vehicles is a good it's a good number. We are also the third largest aerospace manufacturer. We are going to discuss later about Embraer, that is one of the 20 manufacturer in the world, biggest manufacturer in the world. So in order to produce more cars and more vehicles and aerospace planes, including defense or executive planes, we have to have a workforce, specialized workforce in order to produce these two kinds of goods. We are also the 9th largest oil producer in the world, with more than 1 billion barrels in 2019. That it's also a good number. We are also the first largest biofuels producers. We have producers 34.5 liters of biofuels in 2019. Also 60% of the sugarcane production in the world. Our biofuels are produced by basically by sugarcane and corn, but sugarcane is less expensive and is also a very important biofuels that is spreading around our economy. We are going also to discuss this because it's a matrix, important issue in our energy producer matrix. We are also improving. We are trying to improve this participation in the energy production market. We are the largest producer of cellulose. We have a lot of cities here that the economy depends on this cellulose production. We are the 18th largest producer of chemicals and the 9th of steel. We are the 5th largest textile and largest clothing producer. We have more than 20,000 companies related to this kind of work, and 5.5 billion garments per year, or pieces of clothes we have produced last year. We are also the 3rd largest producer of footwear. It's true that many of our industries went to other countries because they could produce in a better price, but we still have many cities here, especially in São Paulo and Rio Grande do Sul. There are 2 states in the south and southeast of Brazil that are specialized in footwear, specifically in footwear. And last year, in 2018, we produced 1 million pairs of footwear, and the workforce in this sector is more than 300 persons that works for this sector. So it's also an important industrial sector for Brazil. Then we can talk specifically about agriculture products. We are considered a very, very specialized country, a big country that produces agriculture goods or raw materials related to agriculture, or also inputs that are used in other industries. And so coffee, orange juice, and soybeans, these are the latest statistics that say that Brazil was the largest producers of this coffee, orange juice, and soybeans. We compete with the United States, especially in terms of production of orange juice and soybeans. Every year we change our ranking position with the United States, but coffee, Brazil is very, very specialized in coffee production. We are the second producer of sugar and the third biggest of corn. Last year we were. We also are the second largest producer of beef meat and of poultry meat. We are the third, and the fourth of pork meat. You can, perhaps if you have the chance to come to Brazil, you'll see that meat is something that Brazilian people love. We love, and it's not so expensive as in other countries. So we produce a lot, and we also are going to explain that we export a lot of this kind of meat, especially beef meat and also poultry meat. But we are a country specialized in this kind of good. Then we can say that also cotton, we are the largest producer, and also it's important raw material in order to produce textiles and other products of the industry, and the fifth of milk, and the sixth of cocoa. We have also go down in the ranking of cocoa and also milk, but we are still a big market with consider these three goods. So if we remember the last slide and this one, we can say that in terms of industrial production and agriculture production, we have a diversified economy. We can produce also things that demand workforce, specialized workforce, and also we have agriculture and also a rural area that is very specialized and produces a lot. Here we are talking about business, agriculture as business. This is something very, very important to the Brazilian economy. Okay, continuing this topic, we are also the second largest producers of iron ore, we have the fifth largest reserves in the world, and we also have more than 8,000 companies in the country's mining industry. Especially if we talk about Minas Gerais, where the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais is located. The main sector of Minas Gerais economy is dependent on these minerals, producers of iron ore, even though we don't extract not so much as in the north of Brazil, but the companies are specially located, or they have their workforce located in Minas Gerais. There are another chart in the following chart that I will show you where Minas Gerais is, and compared to other federal states of Brazil, why it's specialized and why it's considered an important market and producer of iron ore. We are also the largest producers of oil, petroleum, crude petroleum, especially crude petroleum. And in this point, in this regard, Rio de Janeiro state is the most important one. So we have big areas to extract this oil, and we have also a big public company that is specialized in this kind of services. We have a specialized workforce, including a workforce that is responsible for the work related to petroleum in Brazil. And there are, you know how oil is important to many sectors, industrial sectors, and to produce energy. Oil is a raw material that depends on the time, the price go up and then goes down. But what is important here that it's still an important raw material to many industries and also to produce energy. Brazil is the largest producer and exporter of niobium, especially also in Minas Gerais, and the 5th of manganese and bauxite to produce aluminium, and the 10th of gold. We used to be a much more important market producer of gold, but now we are in the 10th, the ranking. But the other minerals are very important to many industries, and they are expensive, rare minerals, so it's important to produce them. And Brazil also exports a lot of minerals. We have the second hydroelectric energy power in the world. We come after China, and we are also going to discuss a little bit about energy production in the world, or our position in the ranking, the international ranking. But what we can say about this is it's a cheap energy production. We can produce energy much cheaper than in other countries, or we can depend less of other raw materials to produce energy. So it's important to emphasize that hydroelectric energy power is very important, and especially we consider our potential to our rivers and our energy matrix. It's an important power point, and we can discuss more this about how we consume. But what I want you to catch about what I explained up to now, it's that unfortunately Brazil is considered a well diversified economy with many industries, different industries, as you have already noticed, and also agriculture is important. That is here in blue. And we can say that although these two sectors are very important and make our economy very diversified, services, it's more responsible for our GDP. You can see that in 2018, service accounts for more than 60% of our GDP. If compare with agriculture, that is less than 5%, and industry, we have less than 20%. So it depends more on services. Which kind of services? Financial services, business services, tourism services, and also personal services, of all kinds of services. But what is important that since 2008, this participation composition didn't change so much. From the 2008, it was 56% of services, and now we are 62%. We have industry composition. The industry composition was around 23%, and now is less, is 18%. And agriculture was 4.57, now it's 4.36. So we can see that in this industry sector is not improving, or has not been improving. Agriculture is important, but it's not has not a very good position in overall terms, and services also has is the most important part of the composition of GDP, and also has the biggest workforce in this sector, services, and also sales retail, that it's important also to focus here, to highlight here that services in Brazil, retail services are very important also in terms of GDP and also in terms of workforce. Now we are going to discuss how Brazil is an important energy producer and consumer. As I have already started discussing this, Brazil is the leader country in the production of renewable and clean energy. We have targets to reach, as Brazil is also an important country in terms of diplomacy, or used to be. So we have natural advantage to be the second hydroelectric energy power in the world, as I have already talked about. After China, we have the second energy power in the world in terms of hydroelectric energy production. We have many rivers that are important to this position, or to this kind of potential production. Although the most of the population is located in the east, the biggest potential to produce energy is in the north of Brazil, in the Amazon area. But we have constructed many hydroelectric enterprises or energy matrix in the east coast. So what does the problem is that when we don't have enough rain in a certain year or in a given year, this should be a problem. In the north, it doesn't happen so usually because the temperature and the climate there are more stable. Or we have some problems now due to this climate change, but we can still say that hydroelectric will continue to be our main energy matrix or energy source. Hydropower accounted for more than 80% of our electricity generation in 2018. We also are investing a lot in eolic wind energy. Now we are the 80th largest producer and the 7th biggest energy consumer in the world, especially due to the enterprises or the industries. They need a lot of energy, and also because Brazil have a very big industry park. We are also the largest market in South America in terms of consuming energy. So we have to produce a lot also. Here you can see in this chart that is published by a North American Agency of Energy. You can see the billion of kilowatts hours we have consumed or generated from 2000 to 2018. You can see that in blue is the hydroelectricity electricity generation. And then we have fossil fuels that includes petroleum and other fossil fuels like natural gas, for example. Then the other sector that we are investing even more is biomass and waste energy. Then nuclear, that is more expensive, and when we have problems in terms of raining, we have some nuclear energy centers that produces more. We can make this adjustment depending on the climate of a given year. Then the wind energy, and in the last position, the solar, that it's still expensive here in Brazil, but we are also improving. So you can see that since 2000, hydroelectricity is the most important type of energy production, electricity, then fossil fuels, and then biomass. There is also growing. Nuclear is not a very important energy matrix here, and solar has become in the last few years. Okay, so hydroelectricity electricity is still the less expensive and the most used. In general terms, what can we say about consumer? How Brazilian people consume, or how the enterprises, and how is the behavior of the consumers in Brazil? As we have people, and the territory is very heterogeneous. We have a lot of inequalities depending on the region, depending on the city, depending on the state. But what we can say overall, that Brazil is the 7th largest consumer market in the world. We are the 9th GDP, or we are the 9th biggest economy and the 7th largest consumer market in the world. Our GDP per capita, it's not low. We have 80,700. In terms of current dollars, we can say, but it's a good amount. And sure, it's not a very good index if we consider that there are people that earn not so much. There are people that earn even more than this. But what we can say that this is, if we consider the whole GDP, what Brazil produces in the whole world, and we have more than 200 persons here, we can say that the average GDP is to 8,700. That is what we are considered a developing country. This is an important index to be considered a developing country also. In the next chart, we are going to discuss how this GDP per capita behavior is if it's improving or not, and why it's a problem. But what you can catch about this is that it's a good GDP per capita in terms of developing countries. 40 million consumers are considered high socioeconomic status. What means that people here in Brazil like buying brands, goods with famous brands or good products. People here, before buying, they know what they are going to buy. They want to know if the brand is responsible, for example, in terms of the environment, and if it's linked to a famous personality, for example. It's important here, and especially if we consider the social status. People that are not in a high social status, they have to do a research before buying, because they have a salary that it's not so high, so they have to go from store to store in order to know where they're going to buy, especially goods that are not that are expensive to them. So, but if we consider the whole population, 40 million consumers are considered high socioeconomic status. About New Frontiers, there is a program of the European Union. There is a good number. Brazil is the 9th largest car market in the world in terms of consuming. We have already seen that Brazil produces a lot of vehicles, but we also buy a lot of cars, and we also import a lot of cars, because the high people here also like buying cars that are very different, or there has something different and more advanced in terms of technology and something like that. Also, we consider about cell phones. People here want to, or like changing their cell phones as soon as they can. And we, as a country, we share almost 10% of global cosmetics market. If you come to Brazil, you realize that here there are a lot of people that want or like buying cosmetics, if we consider the market as a whole, and also going to people here, the image is something that is important. So the cosmetic market is important. I have read that in this period of quarantine, even though most people are trying to stay at home, people didn't stop buying cosmetics, because even though if they are at home, they consider cosmetic as something important to their consuming list. So we are spending even more in cosmetics than before the quarantine. It's something strange, but it's true. Continuing speaking about consumer market, nearly 150 million internet users. We have a big consumer market in terms of internet. Sure, again, there are many differences between the regions and also from the cities in terms comparing to the urban areas. But what is important that more than 150 people here use internet, especially from their cell phones. Around 220 million have smartphones, so we have more smartphones than inhabitants, because we are 211. Perhaps this number is growing, because here smartphones, there are people that have 2 smartphones depending on the enterprise, the telecom enterprise they need, or they want to call someone, and it's not it's expensive service in Brazil, so people usually have 1 or more, 2 or 2 smartphones in order to try to have special services depending on the enterprise, the telecom enterprise. So we have more smartphones than people, than inhabitants. Brazil ranks 10th globally in e-commerce sales. We are improving. We are going high in the rank, international rank, in terms of e-commerce sales. There are a lot of unicorn enterprise here, or information technology enterprises and investments in this area, especially now that we are also already 4 months at home in this quarantine. So the sales, e-commerce sales, are breaking records. Around $7 billion on products were sold online last year. Certainly this year will be even more, in order due to our situation, a lot of time at home. But this is something that is special to highlight, that it's becoming a habit in Brazil. People are getting used to buy as a e-commerce or at the internet. We are at the top ranking as the 15 luxury good markets in the world. As I have already talked about, people with, especially if they are rich, from a rich class, they like buying luxury good markets when the dollar was in a level, not high, so high level as it's now. Many Brazilian people went abroad, especially to the United States, to buy things, and they want update goods. And this is why also the luxury good markets, even though we are in a crisis, economic crisis, the richest people still like buying, and they have how to buy luxury goods. Brazil also ranked the 16th in the international tourism spending compiled. We spent around $20 billion in 2018. Sure, not stay at this amount in the next years, but what we can say that people like going abroad, and if they can, they spend a lot of money there, especially here if we consider the United States, and but also people like going abroad to study or learn something like a foreign language and then spend a lot abroad. That it's important to, according to United Nations World Tourism Organization, Brazil is in this ranking. It's the 16th international tourism spending. Okay. Now, Brazil is also a global destination for foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment, it's the investment we receive from abroad, made by international enterprises. And when we receive a lot of money from abroad for transnational enterprise, it's a good signal, because it means that Brazil represents a special market. There's some advantage here that the foreign investment want to come here. Here we are not talking about financial investment. It's also the investment made in terms of producing goods or services. It's not specialized in, for example, in banking or not for the stock market. It's only related to enterprise. Brazil is the 4th largest of FDI receiver in 2019, and it's the only Latin American country on the top 10 list. What means that we, in terms of Latin America, we have a good position, and we have advantage in terms of natural advantages or workforce advantage or consumer market advantage. It could be because we are a very big consumer markets. In 2018, were spent here, $45 billion were spent here. Last year, $70 billion. In the average, if we compare, we take from 2010 to 2018, the average amount was 122 billion per year. So we are not in a so good position as we used to be, because it depends a lot. This foreign investment depends, for example, on the political landscape or the political environment, and this is something that we have to consider. Also, the macroeconomic stability. It also the foreign direct investment also accounts for this. But what is important here is to mention that Brazil is an important market or destination for foreign direct investment in Latin America. The main investor countries are the Netherlands, the United States, Germany, Spain, Luxembourg, and the Bahamas. This is the last statistics, but we also have to consider other countries like China and Argentina and other Latin American countries that also invest here. The main sectors that they invest are in IT, energy generation. There are a lot of international enterprises here that invest in oil or gas extraction, or a service related to oil and gas extraction. There are a lot of automotive industries. Unfortunately, we don't have a Brazilian industry of vehicles. All of the ones that are here, located here, are from abroad, are international enterprises or transnational enterprises. And this is a industrial policy that is ongoing since the 1960s, we don't stimulate or push Brazilian automotive industry. We received a lot of money from abroad to construct and to produce vehicles here, but all of the brands are international. Financial services, here we are talking about financial services, not stock market. So when an enterprise come here to do a service of financial related for banking, for example, it's okay, it's considered a foreign direct investment. Electricity, paper production, communication and technologies, innovation, communication technologies, ICT, storage and transport, food industries. We have a lot of international food industries here, and also they produce here, but they are international brands, and they also have enterprises here. And in the last position, mining. Mining is also growing up in terms of international investment. So here are the data about foreign direct investment. You can see from 2017 to 2019 that the number is growing, the amount is growing. We received last year more than $71 billion, because here it's million, but the whole amount means $1 billion. The stock is also increasing, and the number of greenfield investment it's also increasing. Greenfield investments is related to new investments. If the enterprise want to initiate or to start another production plant, for example, it's considered greenfield investment. And so because we Brazil government now is especially interested in attracting this kind of investment, because many Brazilian enterprises are being privatized, or they want to privatize them. We can see that the number of greenfield investments is increasing. Value of greenfields investment in terms of $1 million is also increased a lot, from 9 to 30 billion. It's a great amount, and we can consider this, especially if we are talking about energy generation, for example, electricity production, or financial services, for example, because there are many international services companies here. We can say that the foreign direct investment is a good signal that the Brazilian economy is important in global terms. Here you can see the FDI inflows, the top 10 host economies in 2019. Brazil received almost 5% of the total of the FDI made in 2019. The United States have a huge amount, China in the second place, then Hong Kong. The small economies, they are considered small economies in terms, if you compare to United States, for example, but they receive a lot of investments. For example, Hong Kong, Singapore, and also the Netherlands. They are also, all of them are important markets in terms of services, especially transport, business, and other kinds of services. But Brazil is the only country of Latin America in this top host ranking, FDI ranking. Next one, let's see. The source here is the Central Bank of Brazil, okay? Number 6, Brazil is a global player, international and regional economic institutions and forums. Brazil has an important political role in the World Trade Organization, that is the main organization responsible for setting the rules for international trade, for liberalization of the international trade. Brazil is an active country that bargain and make alliances and agreements with other developing countries in order to represent them. Sure, the role is related to the economy, the amount of the GDP, the power, the economic power it has, and the interests. And as Brazil has a good diplomacy, and it's a big country in terms of economy, so it represents a lot of countries, especially if we talk about agriculture rules, liberalization of agriculture goods, liberalization, or also industrial goods, or to protect interests of the developing countries. Brazil has we can say that Brazil has an important and active role in the World Trade Organization. And we can add an information that the chief of the World Trade Organization now is a Brazilian, and he's going to leave the organization in the next future. But what is important to say here, that he was elected, and he was elected because Brazil has made an important work there until he was elected, and now he has a neutral role, sure, but up to be elected, Roberto Azevedo, that is the name of the chief, had a very important role in terms of negotiating the developing countries' interests. Then we can say that we have a very, very important role in the construction and the developing of the Southern Common Market. In Spanish, we say Mercosur, is the Mercado Común del Sur. That is a common market of constructed that has been under construction since 1991. That is a project of to protect the interests of the southern countries of in South America, of these countries of Southern America, and includes Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Venezuela was approved to be a member in 2016, but then, sorry, in 2012, but then due to all the political problems that Venezuela is facing, 2016, it was suspended from the common market. And although the media usually doesn't talk or mention too much Mercosur, we can say that it's a very special and important market to Brazil. We have preferences, trade preferences with all our partners here, and we export a lot of manufacturing goods to our partners from the common market, the Southern Common Market. What is very, very important to Brazil. Latin America in general is important to Brazilian exports, but especially the Southern Common Market, because we have preferences in terms of trade. We export without many trade barriers as to other countries. Here we have to face fewer barriers than with compared to other markets or to other countries. Brazil is also is a member of the BRICS countries. That is a forum. It's not a formal organization, it's a forum that Brazil takes part with Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It was established in 2009, and every year there is a summit, a presidential summit that the presidencies or the prime ministers meet themselves in order to establish some rules or the roles they are going to have together. And they are very active. The first aim was to propose international financial institutions reform after the 2007-2008 economic crisis. But then other topics were added to the agenda, to the BRICS agenda, in order to represent a special group or a more represent economies that were taking off, that were considered emerging economies that are going to grow a lot in the next years or next decades. We can talk about this in the final part of our, when we open to discussion, because the BRICS role changed a lot. But what is important, that it's still an important forum for Brazil, although the current government doesn't think so. But we can discuss this later on. And Brazil is also an important member of G20, that also was created after the 1999 financial crisis, especially in the Asia. But what is important, as BRICS aim is to propose reforms to the international financial institutions, G20 also. G20 wants to propose new rules to what we say international relations or international economics as multilateralism, a different multilateralism, more inclusive, that takes into account the ideas and propositions of the developing and even undeveloped countries. They are not big powers, and they have different interests, and they want different rules to this world, not focused only on what the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank thinks or they recommend. And in the last and not least are trade agreements. Beyond Mercosur, that I have already mentioned, and it's considered a special important market for Brazil. Brazil is improving the trade agreements with more than 15 countries, because we are still considered a country that has not many trade partners. So we already have some trade agreements, but we want to have more. That means that we are a more open economy. We should, or the government think we should be a more open economy, or more our insertion in international economy should be more proactive. We can have more partners to have preferential rules, not we have to wait what the World Trade Organization say. We can also talk about this later. Brazil has an important export market, is an important export market. As we have already mentioned, all the capacity and the potential to produce many things, from agriculture goods to services. We are the 25th largest exporter in the world, although we are considered an economy that is not so open or not so outward-looking economies as many economies in the east of the world, where are China, Hong Kong, and Malaysia, and Thailand. We have not so proactive strategy open to the world market, but we have this ranking position. We are the 25th largest exporter in the world out of 122 countries. We consider in this MIT, MIT research. Our position was 27th in 2017, so we improved a little bit. We are the second largest trade flow in terms of volume. Sure, the amount depends on the dollar price, but in terms of volume, everything what we export we are considered the second largest trade flow in Latin America. Here we are behind Mexico. Mexico is a market that is more related or linked to the United States and have a free agreement to export goods to the United States, and have many trade agreements with other countries in the world, and also in Latin America. Mexico is considered in terms of volume a bigger market than Brazil. Brazil is the largest exporter of coffee, beef meat. We have the second cattle herd with more than 200 heads. We also the large exporter of orange juice. As I have already mentioned, we compete with the United States. Sugar, we are behind India, but coffee and chicken meat, soybeans and sugar, we have also a good collocation. What it means, looking to this data, is that Brazil focused on agriculture products. We have a lot of advantage to produce and export this kind of goods. Coffee, meat, juice, because we have a lot of investments in this sector. We have important public programs in order to finance this sector. And it was a traditional sector in Brazil, especially agriculture is a very, very traditional sector in Brazil. We are the second largest exporter of corn, tobacco, cotton, and food in general. If we consider the food security that many countries are talking about now, it's a good thing, but we have to be cautious, because otherwise we are going to depend even more on producing and exporting this kind of goods. And this is something that we can discuss after, if it's good or not. There are times that the price of these products are high, there are times that they are not so high, and these volatile prices perhaps is a very, very big problem if we consider the whole economy and their participation in the whole economy as in terms of production or in terms of exports. Brazil is the largest exporter of agriculture in general. Here we can differentiate what is agriculture products, what are agriculture products from food, because food in most of times are considered processed food. Some foods have a level of processing, or they should have go to the they have to go to the industry. Some products don't have, so these are considered agriculture products in general, or raw materials, or inputs to other industries. And in terms of food producer, in terms of the simple form or the processed, we are the fourth. We've considered the processed food industry. We are also the fourth largest exporter of flesh pork meat, the second exporter of iron ore. All of them are related to our production, or our total production. If we produce a lot, we also have a good potential to export. And the first, our largest biofuel exporter, so especially ethanol that is made of sugarcane. We have competitive prices and competitive advantage in producing this. Here you can see the total exports of 242 million. There is an M missing there. $1 million or billion, sorry, $1 billion in 2018. And you can see the participation in terms of percentage of the Brazilian products. You can see that crude oil, it's the first of the rank, then crude petroleum, sorry, then soybeans, iron ore, it's the third one, sulfate of chemical and wood pulp, soybean meal in green, raw sugar in green also, and then poultry meat in pink. These are the 7 most important goods we export. There are the ones that I have a representative amount. For example, planes, cars, 2%, poultry meat. I have already, frozen bovine meat. But you can see from this whole picture that Brazil exports the most of products are related to minerals or agriculture, or a processed food, something processed but related to the agriculture market. We can also discuss in the next slides what it represents in terms of the growth and the developing of the economy. And what are the top destinations if we consider 2018? China, Japan, China, United States. You can see that Argentina in green is very important. We export 6%, but if we consider the rankings, the third and more important destination of the exports of Brazil, then Chile and Spain. There are other European countries and also of the Middle East, to where we export food, especially food. But what is important to take into account is that China is our top destination. In fact, it's our top destination since 2009, has been our top destination since 2009, when after the economic crisis, it changed with the United States. The United States was the first one, and then China turned to the first one. Argentina was in this third position, was our third and more important top destination of Brazilian exports. And it's important to emphasize that Brazil and Argentina have a special relation, economic relation, not only political relation, but also economic relation. Here you can see how Brazil, the top 10 exporting of agriculture products in 2018 in terms of billion percent change from 2017 to 2018. If we consider the European economy, the European Union as a whole, not individually, the European Union with 28 countries, we will see that it's the number one of the number one exporters of agriculture products in the world. After the European Union, United States, and then Brazil. So you can see that comparing to other developed countries or developing countries, that Brazil is very, very representative in terms of exporting agriculture products in the world. And it's something that really is the basis of our economy, and it's growing. And even though the workforce there in the sector is not so representative, or even in terms of GDP, it's something that even in times of crisis, as the 2014, 2015, or now, it's a sector that's very important to help Brazilian economy to recover from the problems. In this sector is a traditional one, and we have natural, but also we wanted to improve our advantages. We invest a lot to be in this position. This is important to emphasize. It's a effort from the private sector and from the public sector. In terms of imports, if Brazil is the 25th in terms of export, largest export market, we are the 30th largest importer in the world. Also, the source is the MIT OECD data. The top 5 imports are agriculture, industrial machinery. We imported 21 billions in 2018. Electrical machinery and equipment, mineral fuels, including oil, and here it's not crude, but processed. Vehicles, we produce a lot, but we also import a lot. Organic chemicals, turbojets, we also produce, but we also import a lot. So if we compare the top 5 export goods and the top 5 import goods, we can see that the value added to the imports are bigger than the export ones. We export more goods that have not so big value or not so added value as what if you compare to the imports in 2018. Organic chemicals, for example, vehicles, the imports have a bigger price, a higher price than the ones that we export. And here also the total amount of exports were less than the export, 170 billion. Here I have it's not so clear to check. I will say to you the goods that are there. For example, import, the number 1 is refined petroleum or processed, vehicle parts in blue, in light blue. Then the integrated circuit, crude petroleum, sorry, I have already said, integrated circuits in blue in the first place, cars, and then special purpose ships, coal buckets or delivery trucks also that are here and are important collocation. If you go to this webpage, UFMG, you can check all of them in terms of the amount of imports, of exports, and also the kind of products. They are classified in terms of the kind of product, in order to facilitate we understand the whole picture of the imports of the exports done by a given country. Here, if our export destination, main export destinations, China, in terms of import, it's the same. China represents almost 20% of our imports. And then it's South Korea, then it's the United States with almost 17, Germany in the 3rd place, Argentina again in green, France and Italy also in red, in purple. So we can consider Belgium, Russia, and Mexico in blue. But what is important that it's, again, China and the United States are the 1st and the 2nd place again, and Argentina in the 3rd. That it's important to mention, to highlight. And then the other special partners are other European countries and some in the Middle East. Here, in Northern EU, to have a big picture about our import and exports, if you consider the green line, the top, you can see the exportations of Brazil. It's what we export, what leave the country, and in blue, what enter the country in terms of goods and services. So we have our surplus. In the last year, we have surplus in terms of trade from 2016 until 2018. But what we also have to know, to realize, is that something volatile. You can see in 2018, from 2018 to 2009, that both import and export didn't have a good performance, didn't perform so well due to all the problems we had in international economy. That it's something that happened all around the world. But another point that we have to consider here is the advantage, the competition profile that we have, and also the dollar. What is the dollar value in terms of between time to time? So if we consider the volume, we don't have to mention the dollar price. But when you consider the amount, yes, we have surpluses, but there are times that the dollar have a high price, especially if we consider from 2017 and in 2018 that the price of the dollar is getting overvalued in terms of our national currency, that is real. Thanks to the agriculture sector, we have also this performance. We can say that the agriculture sector and the mineral sector are very important in terms of our surplus. Let me see here. Oosh. So let's talk about Brazil as important business hub. Here we have the top 10 Brazilian companies in the global 2000 Forbes ranking. You can see Petrobras in the first place. That is the enterprise related to oil petroleum production. It's a public one. Then the Itaú Unibanco, that is a bank and it's private. Bradesco, Vale was called Vale do Rio Doce. It's a mining enterprise. Banco do Brasil, it's another bank that is public. Eletrobras, that it's an enterprise that the Brazilian government wants to privatize now. There is related to energy production. JBS, that it's an enterprise of processed food that is private. Itaúsa, finance and industry enterprise, also private. Braskem, petrochemical industry. And in the last position, Oi, it's a telecom enterprise. Here you can see that we receive a lot of FDI, foreign direct investment, but we also have big enterprises. These enterprises, some of them are almost are national, completely national. Others are open in the stock market, so they have mixed. They can have foreign investors. But what we can see that the bank sector is very strong here in Brazil, and also the petroleum. Petrobras was involved in a lot of political scandals of corruption in the last years, but now it's in the top again of the 10 biggest Brazilian companies, if you consider the 2,000 enterprises in the world, the biggest enterprise in the world in terms of revenue. And what is important to mention also is, although there are a lot of big enterprises, most of the business enterprises in Brazil are not big; they are small. Look, 94% of the total of the enterprise in Brazil are micro and small, and they are also responsible for the workforce. Most of part of workforce work for this micro and small enterprise. So the distribution is it's very unequal. The big ones is only responsible for participation of 1% of in total industrial establishment. That is not very represented if we consider the workforce and the revenue of them. The medium, it's not also very representative. Micro and small enterprises are very popular here, and they are responsible for most of the GDP and production, and also the workforce of the Brazilian economy. In order to end the first part, the monthly inflation rate, we can see here that we have a percentage change that is not so noticeable. We have an inflation rate in Brazil that if we consider that in the 80s were almost 1,000 a year, we can see that Brazil, in terms of macroeconomic stability, is considered a stable economy. The inflation rate or the change of the prices are not very noticeable from one year to the other, especially now that we are in an economic crisis. It should be under 3%, perhaps 2%, that the change of the price. Sure, the poverty, the low class, it's suffer more when there are private changes, so price change. So it's something that we have also to consider if we talk about food and what they have to consume basically. But in general terms, in macro stability terms, we can consider that Brazil is a stable economy. So, and we have the largest income transfer program in the world. I think you have already heard about Bolsa Família, that is Programa Bolsa Família, PBF. The federal government under President Lula introduced this program in order to transfer household transfer of 70 reais, that is something around perhaps now $20 or something more. Depends on how many children you have and what are their age. But this is considered in Brazil or abroad a very special or important program of 8 million beneficiaries that was expanded during the decades, or from 2003 to now, and is responsible for nearly 28% of the total poverty reduction in Brazil. It's proved that it works, and it works, and it's a very important program that transfer revenue from the government to the low, the people that don't earn so much or don't earn enough to spend with basic products or basic services. Okay. Here we can talk about, now I will talk more quickly because we can open then questions, because all the data that I will present now are more conjectural, and we have to discuss about the parts or the points that Brazil is not so good or doesn't perform so good. In the last years, you perhaps have already heard that Brazil GDP growth started shrinking from 2000, especially when we consider the 2014-2015 political crisis, and also the commodity boom prices before, until 2014. From 2003 to 2014, Brazilian exports were good performance because the prices of the minerals and the raw materials and the commodities and agricultural products. From 2014 to now, these prices were not so high, and so it influences the real GDP, but also the political problems that we are facing since then, and the industry that is not so competitive in if we compare to other developing countries, the problem of our economy that is very closed. We didn't have many, we didn't thought in a good strategy to open our economy. So this is also a problem, and we can discuss in the final part of this presentation. Here you can see the Economist, that it's a famous journal that mentioned in 2009 that Brazil takes off. This is the year that Brazil started to take part of the BRICS group. Brazil takes off, and then Brazil blow it after this was the year, a year of our World Cup. We spent a lot in order in terms of infrastructure and organization, and it was not it not developed the economy as people here thought. And then 2016 was the year of also the Olympic Games, and the year that we have the impeachment of President Dilma. And if you consider all these political events, and I think you're going to talk about this with Professor Bruno this week, you're going to see why exactly these political problems had influenced the economy so much. But what is important to mention here is that the raw material products, goods, the prices of them were not so high, and Brazil didn't had a good strategy in order to this economic insertion in the international economy, and we have missed something that we didn't put our economy in a good position if compared to other developing countries. If we add the political problems, we will see that what economists say, the betrayal of Brazil. We start again another crisis, and another crisis that if we change the president or change all the political landscape, the problems, the economic problems won't change. Here we have already, what I want to mention here is the growth, the economic growth in terms of percentage, 2015 to 2009. In the last year, our economic growth rate was only 1% in terms of economic growth, and we have an economic crisis since 2014. The domestic demand variation, sure, due to our problems, we have this performance that it is not also very good. The consumption didn't change so much, even though we are a big consumer market. The investment, that is something very, very important to any economy to recover from a crisis, even if it's a public or private investment. It went from -13 to only 2%. That it's not a good variation if you want to recover from a crisis. And if you don't have good infrastructure, a good political environment, a macroeconomic stability or credibility, you won't attract international investment or even national investment. In the next one is industrial production. Look at the annual variation. We have a bad performance in terms of industrial production. There are a lot of economists and analysts that say that we are deindustrialized. We are losing our industries, especially the high value-added industries, to other ones or services that still don't have this high value or high prices or technologies, enough technology to compete in the international environment, international market. With all these problems, the retail sales also suffered a lot. They went from -4 to 1.8 in 2009, and the employment rate, I think that you also know, now it's worse, but it was around 12 million people that are unemployed here in Brazil now. due to political problems, economic problems, because we don't have a good workforce or prepared, educated workforce to be competitive in this market. We don't receive a lot of investments. There are a lot of reasons for that. The industry participation, as I have already mentioned to you, it was decreased during the 1950s, when we can say that Brazil started this industrial policy. We are decreasing from the 80s to now. Perhaps there are a lot of explanations to that, but we can discuss in the end of this presentation also. But what is important is to understand that between the 60s and the 90s, the industry participation in GDP was higher than after that, especially after 2000, or in this new century, the industry participation is shrinking, and is shrinking fast. Here we have the 10 largest states based on their GDP. You can see in the left map that São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Minas Gerais, the 3 states of the Southeast, are the biggest business hub, and they are responsible for the GDP, the biggest part of our GDP, and they concentrate also the participation in the GDP that is in the second map in the right, in your right. So what we can see that Brazil is very large, big, and the heterogeneity in terms of participation, absolutely participation in GDP, and also in terms of relative participation in GDP. In the blue map, you can see the participation in relative terms, and you can see that Minas Gerais, where UFMG is located, is responsible with 10% if we compare to São Paulo, that is responsible to 32%, and Rio, that is responsible for 8%. And they also concentrate the most of part of population. I don't know if Luciana can say that we have to begin the questions, because I am in the end of...
It would be interesting. We have very interesting questions, Professor. And I think students would enjoy if we could start the discussion. Is that okay with you?
Okay, no problem. We can talk about other topics now.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation, by the way. And I'm going to try to divide the questions into blocks, because some of them are related.
Okay.
The first one, I think, is everyone is anxious to know a little bit more about the impact of this pandemic of the coronavirus in Brazilian industry. And for example, Victor from the UFMG says, Professor, do you think the coronavirus crisis may have a structural impact in this GDP composition per sector? And then Hemelin is asking, I was wondering the same thing, what do you think will be the main impact of COVID-19 in the Brazilian economy? Last year, we already had the lowest GDP growth rate in 3 years, so the scenario isn't so positive. That's true. And there is Ribka from Indonesia asks, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. I wonder to what extent the COVID-19 pandemic affects Brazil's economy. Moreover, how is the Brazil economic policy response towards this pandemic condition? And also Denise says, according to you, how the Brazilian political crisis increases the effect of COVID-19 in terms of economic policy? I just said that.
Sorry, the last one, how Brazilian economy?
How the Brazilian economy, Brazilian political crisis increases the effect of COVID-19 in terms of economic policy?
Okay, so I think I can use more data to show you that first first part of my answer. I don't think the COVID-19 is responsible for our economic problems now. It's the only responsible or the most important responsible, if I can say like that. If you look at this data, we have already a high unemployment rate. We have already difficulties in improving our industries. We didn't have a strategy of a long term. What COVID-19 impacts is that it worsened the problems that we have already had. As we don't have, we changed it. In 2019, President Bolsonaro was elected, he started his mandate. And what I can see that is we again changed political party, we changed a political and economic strategy. We wanted to, the ministry wanted of economy wanted a more open economy, but nobody didn't anything very specifically straight to do this or to thinking from 4 years now. So you can see there that the problems, the economic problems were already there. And what we are going to have now is that a president that denied the problems or don't face the problems in a good manner. We will have the GDP, the forecast that the GDP shrink from 5 to 8%. Even though last year, as we have already seen, there were already, our economic growth rate was only 1%. So the problems of our economy will continue because we don't think of long-term strategies in terms of industry, improving the workforce, the education programs. The only thing that I think that it was good that this government did until now is that the urgency aid that he gave to almost 80 million people. That is a very expressive number. People that prove that don't have to earn or that don't have conditions to earn enough to eat or to consume the basic goods. They can prove there and have for a 3 month, and now it will be extended to 5 month aid or salary. It's an emergency salary gave by the government in order to buy products or to buy food, especially food. And here you can see that the informality rate, it's also a problem here in Brazil, as many of people or almost many people, almost 40% don't have a formal employment. This is a very problem. They suffer even more with a coronavirus pandemic like that. So in my opinion, there are structural problems, as already mentioned, and now the conjuncture problems that we don't face as we should or we must face. So we will have more problems in the next future, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right, Professor? That's really worrying situation, right, we're living. But anyways, and then another question that was brought, and not only one person, but several people asked, for example, the process of deindustrialization. So Stephanie asked, can you explain better the reasons for this deindustrialization? And then there is another question by Maria from University of Queen Mary, University of London. Where are economic policies focused on developing service industry or on resource extraction and agriculture? I think that's related, right? I think there's one more concerning this. Why did the country, right? Here. With Maria again, do you think Brazil suffers from the resource curse, meaning that although it has and exploits a lot of natural resources, this cannot achieve sustainable economic and social development and growth because it relies so much on extraction. And yeah, basically that.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. I think that all of them are related. I think that when you think about industrial or trade policy, that is a problem that all the Latin American countries face. We change the government, we change the policy. There is no strategy of long term, and as we change a lot of political parties, they think differently. So if you look at this industry participation, you can see that there was a strategy in order to improve our industry from the 60s to the 80s at least. And then we can see that here Brazil had a strategy of import substitution. And it was very, very, even though the government was democratic or military, it was not directly elected, the strategy went on. So we protect our key industries and we received investments from abroad. We want to improve our this goods industry, so we thought which one were more important. After, in my opinion, after 2009, the 90s, when all the neoliberal policies were widespread in the world wide, many countries, starting from the United States, made open policy strategy or chose this kind of strategy. And we were advised by the Washington Consensus and the Washington international institutions to do the same. We are not so prepared. We received a lot of money from abroad, but what happened is that our industry was not prepared. So if you look at this participation, you look that many of the industry couldn't face this competition. And we changed from industry to services. That is what happened here. The open of the economy was not totally bad, but was not totally good if you consider the strength of our industry. And that is why also I want to mention this labor productive in thousands of US in terms of dollars. We also didn't realize that our labor productive in our education should be improved. If you look at China, how it improved in the last years, even other countries like Mexico, they paid more attention to some key sectors and that they need a special labor or workforce in order to do something. Here, unfortunately, the access to education is so different. We have a lot of good schools and universities, and most of ones, unfortunately, aren't. So this is something that impacts directly in the social development of the country. How can you have a specialized workforce, even though to work in the industry or in the manufacturing industry or in the technological industry? We have we improved in the agriculture sector, but not in other sectors that are also important to improve our GDP or our development. So this is something also that, in my opinion, the governments didn't see, and the social impacts are very, very good. What do we focus on? The strict products, the things that we have natural advantage, not the ones that we can develop or we can improve. That is my question answer.
Excellent, excellent. We have many more. We don't have much time, so I probably won't have time to address all of them, but there are some very interesting questions. I think we have time for a couple more. Francisco asks, you mentioned that Brazil is objective for foreign investment, but rather than being an attribute, can't this be partially explained due to poor employment structure and deregulation? Funding comes from the Bahamas and the Netherlands, both considered tax heavens. Couldn't this be read as an actual threat for Brazil development instead?
With regard to the FDI, it's good to receive foreign direct investment. Sure, it is. But what we say, we should consider the big picture, where Brazil is in this what we call global value chains. Which kind of transformation or manufacturing industry we have? We have only manufactured that assemble goods, or we have engineering centers, developing in research and developing centers. What we can say about that? I think that we have even more manufacturer centers and enterprises that want to explore our natural advantages in terms of agriculture or minerals. So most of the international investment that comes to Brazil are related to this kind, as we have already seen. Perhaps something's changed in terms of the startups that invest in other technological services and fintechs and other things like that. But the whole picture, we can say that in general terms, that we still are more competitive in extraction of raw material, and that is something very strategically, especially for China growth, for example, or from the Netherlands. Why they want to be here? Because they know how to explore some natural advantages or natural advantages that we already have. So I think that the most of this investment come to because we are not so well positioned in these global value chains. We have still many enterprises that explores our natural advantages, and this is not something that you want to develop more or something like that. Or some services, some kind of services that are also concentrated in some federal states of Brazil.
Excellent. And then focusing on these, on the types of companies Brazil has and the top 10, there are two questions here from Victor and also Grace. And Victor asks, is it common in other countries to have so much banks among the biggest companies in the country? And then Grace says, Professor, I would like to know why the top 10 Brazilian companies in the global 2000 Forbes ranking are mostly come from a private company instead of the public, private sector. Even you mentioned that one of the public companies there are planned to become private in the near future. What kind of problems are faced by the public ones? And she's from Indonesia.
Okay, thank you for your question. The first point I want also to focus or to highlight is that, Brazilian stock market and the financial sector, in terms of receiving financial investments, I think it's not so linked to the real economy. The neoliberal policies made or adopted in the last 30 years approved that these investments come to Brazil in order to enjoy our high rates of returning. We pay a lot for this money or investment to come here. The banks are very have a lot of revenue, and because they also put high prices in their services for the population, and the government approves it. I think that it's something that we have to highlight. Neoliberal, or even the governments like Luiz Inácio da Silva or even Dilma, they authorize that these banks put these high prices, and when you lend the money, you have to pay a lot, and as the population don't have how to a good salary, a lot of people go to the bank to take this money. So I think that the services here, they're not so the government don't care. The government doesn't care about how much people will pay for that. That is why I think that we don't have a real. The financial sector is not linked to the real economy, especially we consider, for example, the stock market now. They have high revenue and the economy is not well developed and it's not performing very well. So I think that it's a very good. That is why also the banks are the biggest enterprises in Brazil. They earn a lot and they are allowed to do this by the government. That is my opinion.
Excellent.
There's a financial elite that wants to do that, and they are represented in our political parties and executive, and they have interest this happen like that.
Well, we could stay here a lot longer. We have very, very interesting questions, and I mean, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to kindly ask you if you could. Some of the students would like, if some of the students would like to ask you questions through your email, would that be possible?
I have my email address. If they want to send me emails, no problem.
Yeah, because there are very interesting questions. I mean, this is such a rich topic, right? And especially now we're living this chaotic situation. So it's even more, we want to know even more about Brazilian economy and world economy. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. I would like to thank you so much.
To the students, because they have different backgrounds. So if
exactly.
they have questions about the current situation, please feel free to email me, no problem.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much for the questions. I'm sure you've learned so much today, and we have like an entire week ahead of us, and we,
hope they enjoy their time and learn a lot about Brazilian studies.
Yeah, so we say that they're enjoying their time in Brazil, although virtually. They're here somehow. Right? Okay. Thank you very much. And then, guys, just this quick reminder, we were talking in the WhatsApp group that you should watch the movie, Que Horas Ela Volta? And because we're going to have a discussion about Brazil and Brazilian situation, discussing that movie. And in 30 minutes, we'll start the Portuguese classes. So go grab a mug of coffee, stay up, and we'll meet again in a few minutes. Okay? Thank you very much, Professor, once again.
Thank you. You are welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.